Alright, so now that I've unboxed the Printrbot Plus, I'm going to move on to the tinting process that I mentioned. And like I said, I'm going to do both the Printrbot Plus as well as the Power Tower kit. If you haven't seen how these come, this is basically it. It's shrink wrapped in the cellophane with mostly laser cut parts. Not terribly complicated. Just watch out for these 5 small little loose pieces. Those are sort of complex until you figure out what to do with them. A few bearings and screws, and then the other side. So not a whole lot there. Definitely don't want to get them mixed up with the Printrbot Plus pieces, so I'll keep those stacked. To give you an idea of what the tinting process can actually look like, this is another Power Tower that I've already done using the same process, and as you can see, it's a very rich red with very even tones. There's just a few of the pieces. So I'll talk real quick about the process. You definitely want to go over the pieces real quickly. The tint itself suggests using a 320. This is actually a 220, but I'm going to get a 320 for doing this. And basically you just want to give, a light sand to all the edges, and of course the flat surfaces, just kind of knock down some of the production dust and get some of the loose grains and whatnot on the wood just before you do that. And of course you want to wipe it down with a lint-free cloth or shop towel or something, just to get all that off. You don't have to do anything terribly fancy because most of it's going to come off in the liquid anyway when you do the dunking process, because we're not going to be brushing or rolling, sponging or anything like that. We're actually going to bathe these in the mixture. So again, once you have all of the sanding done, then you're going to take a tub. Normally I would use something this size because it's plenty big enough for the Power Tower. Unfortunately, for the Printrbot Plus, no matter what I do, it's never going to get down below the level that the mixture is going to be. So because of that, I'm just going to use one for both. And so I've got this larger organizer tray, and it's going to be filled up maybe to about 3/4 of an inch or an inch or so with the mixture. What is this mixture? First of all, it's these trans tint, and they come from Woodcraft, probably other places as well, but in all sorts of colors. I have orange, purple, blue, green, red, obviously, as I showed you. They have much more natural colors as well, yellows and almonds and things like that, if you're not into the bright colors. But I want something that stands out, so I think in this case I'm actually going to use the green tint, and this goes a long way. The small little bottle, 1 ounce, gets mixed with 2 quarts of denatured alcohol. And like I said in one of my posts, you can actually use Everclear, or so I was told, in lieu of this, and it may be cheaper, but I think I'd rather just go with what they sold me at the store, just to be on the safe side. What I did for the original Power Tower to get this was to mix half of this bottle, which is 1 ounce, with 1 quart of the alcohol, and that produced this. Supposedly 2 quarts with 1 ounce will produce this sort of color level, but I kind of went overboard just to be on the safe side. It really does go a long way, so probably in this case I'll use a full bottle of the green with maybe half to 2/3, 3/4 of the gallon sized denatured alcohol. Put that in here, and then basically come in here and I'll soak each of these pieces. I'll have my gloves on, of course, and I'll also be wearing my very important mask with the cool flow, anyway, to protect me from the vapors. It is alcohol, and you don't want to be breathing that for too long unless you want to get drunk along the way. But in any case, the way that I did it before was to leave it in here for 30 seconds, a minute each side, then flip it, and kind of continue that process. Have multiple pieces going at the same time, whatever will fit, and keep everything in there for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes per piece, depending on the size. And you can kind of tell when it's starting to really pick up that color that you want. And then once you pull them out, you'll obviously need a space that's ready, because you don't want to drip this dye on anything that you care about, because it's definitely going to tint it. And what I did is get a bunch of these painter's triangles. You've all seen them at the big box stores and woodcraft and whatnot, and basically just have them set up so that the points of the triangles are holding up everything, so that you're not actually laying any of the surface area onto something and messing up the color. So it's good to have, you know, lots of these. They're cheap, and of course once you have your printer going, you can actually make these yourself. So anyway, that's the process. I'm not going to bore you by spending hours sanding on video, but once I do get the sanding done, and before I start actually putting the mix together, I will come back on video and show how that gets blended and start showing a few of the parts, and they can come back and show what the final results are. Alright, welcome back. We're now going to do the tinting part of the process. I finished sanding. I actually used a 220 grit and not the 320 that I mentioned. 220 turned out to be fine, actually. So what I have is those little painter's triangles, the pyramids that you see at any big box store, woodcraft. I have a bunch of those laid out. There I've got my pan where I'm going to put the dye, and then I've got some more of those triangles set up over there. We're going to be doing quite a few pieces between the actual Printrbox Plus and the power tower. So I'm going to keep things focused over there on the tub and show you how we mix together the dye. So again, denatured alcohol. Normally a quart of this is going to run you about $6 or $7, but if you get a gallon, it's only about $13, $14. So obviously more economical to go with the big sizes, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of dyeing. And again, this is the same thing as Everclear basically, so in a pinch you could substitute, but I think I'd rather go with this anyway. So I'm going to pour about half of this. I want to get a deep enough layer that I can actually submerge the laser cut pieces. Since I'm having to use such a big pan, it's going to take quite a bit of liquid to get that layer that I'm looking for. Unfortunately, with the Printrbox Plus, the pieces are long enough that I can't use a smaller but deeper pan. So that should be good enough. That's a little over halfway of what I've used. And like I said, I'm going with the green today, the trans tint. And normally you would do 1 ounce or half a bottle for 2 quarts, but I'm going to go ahead and do just about the full bottle so you get a nice rich color out of this. Probably can't tell from the camera, but it actually almost looks black. It's so dark. And then I'm just taking a regular cheap foam sponge, just kind of mix it up. It does a pretty good job of mixing itself, but just to be on the safe side. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, got to wear the mask because the fumes are pretty potent. I've got a fan in here kind of blowing things around to help with the ventilation, but it's still pretty strong in here right now. Alright, once again got the mask on, got it nice and secure. I'm going to put some gloves on now to protect my hands and be back in just one moment. Alright, as I mentioned, got my gloves on now. Not sure if these are the perfect gloves, but These are the ones that I went with. They seem to do pretty good with dealing with alcohol. They didn't get eaten through or anything the last time I worked with this, so they were inexpensive and seemed to work out pretty well. So now we are ready to start dipping. So what I'm going to do is take a piece that just about everybody's familiar with. The base plate in this case, like I said, it is the Printrbot Plus, so it's a little bit longer than just the regular LC version. And I'm just going to do this one at a time right now just to show you the process. Normally I would do several at a time, but for now I just want to show you guys kind of how it works. So as you can see, it's just plain birch at this point. And you give this a quick stir just to make sure that it's still mixed up. Definitely want to be careful about your environment because this dye will stick to a lot of things. So you want to make sure that you've got everything covered with paper or something that you don't care about. So anyway, in we go. Just gently drop it in there, kind of pat it down. As you can see, we just barely have enough level to kind of submerge the whole thing. And even if we just bring it up right now, you can see it's already starting to take in some of that color within just those first few seconds. So I usually just try to keep it moving a little bit just to make sure that it's got the dye flowing over and under the surface. And then maybe every 20 or 30 seconds or so I'll flip it over, kind of get that evenness. Different pieces are kind of work differently. Some are pretty much just rectangular sheets of wood, and some are very intricate and small, so the timing is going to vary between the different pieces, and you'll just have to judge it by the color. But for the most part, you'll get a consistent tint in all your pieces. It's not going to over or under, as long as you do, at least, several minutes. As you can see with my fingers, the dye definitely gets it all over everything, which is why you want to wear these gloves. The interesting thing about working with alcohol as the solvent is that it's very cold, especially with the fan blowing on it. Since alcohol acts as a natural coolant, it's actually very cold in this batch of dye compared to the probably 85-90 degrees that it is in the garage. So just to kind of show you where we are so far. And again, I haven't let this kind of drip, but this is kind of where we're heading already. This is a big piece, so I'm going to keep this one in a little bit longer. And it's an important piece because it's definitely one that gets seen on the printer, at least parts of it. But this is the basic process. Just kind of putting pieces in there, and again, like I said, I usually do multiple to make this go a lot faster. Especially with the smaller pieces, you can get a whole bunch of them in there and just keep rotating them throughout the process, and then bring them out and put them onto these pyramids to let them dry. That way you don't put them flat on the surface and have the dye absorbed into the paper. I usually try to handle it by the holes rather than actually touching into the other part of the wood. That way I don't get any like smudges or prints on the wood as I go. You definitely want to kind of let everything roll off of it in different directions so that you don't get any extra dye staying on there in any particular area. So as you can see, hopefully you can see from this, I mean, you still catch the grain in here because all we're doing is just essentially a stain. We're not adding any thickness to the wood, so it's not a paint or anything like that. So we're not adding any dimensions that are going to cause problems with placing screws or any of the other pieces, because it's just simply not any thicker. It's just being absorbed into the wood, and it's really almost drying as I'm holding it here because the alcohol is simply evaporating and leaving the dye behind. Now if I can do this without getting dye all over my camera, you can see I have placed it on 2 of the pyramids, and that's where it's going to rest until it dries. It'll be dry easily within 30 minutes to an hour, but I'm probably going to leave them overnight, just not mess with them, and start assembly in the morning. So at this point I'm going to continue with the process, and I will turn the camera back on once I've done them all, just to show you guys kind of what it looks like at the end, and then we will proceed with the assembly starting tomorrow. Alright, it's about 45 minutes later. We're now finished up. That's what's left of the dye. It's actually evaporated quite a bit just during the time that I've used it. It's not so much that I've used up the dye, but it's really just the alcohol's evaporated out, especially with the fan going. Here are most of the actual Printrbot pieces, at least 3 of the sub-assemblies, and then the main print bed plus the base and the bridge piece. Over there I have mostly power tower pieces, and then I ran out of room, so I had to put some things down low as well. Alright, so that's that, and as you can see, they are all a nice even green, despite them being dipped for different lengths of time. They generally even out to about the same color. It's definitely a very nice rich shade of green. So I'm going to let these dry overnight and then begin assembly tomorrow. And here we have a quick tease of what the ultimate Printrbot Plus is going to look like once it's been assembled. And again, this is the tinted green version. Don't have all the wiring plugged in yet, and one of the cables is still, one of the belts is still not hooked up. But just to give you an idea of what the finished product is going to look like, again with the green tinted birch, I think it came out pretty nice. Of course, the next step would be to actually print the printed pieces in a similar green to complete the effect. Too bad the printer heating bed PCB board is red and not green, but I guess I could always do a completely red Printrbot and then it would match, but I think overall the green looks pretty nice. Anyway, that's the result of what the Printrbot Plus will look like after the tinting process, and of course after the assembly videos. Make sure you check out the assembly videos if you want to know how to actually get it from the tinted wood stage to the stage that you see right now.